Hello, my friends. When you're working on your instructional design or e-learning portfolio, one of the biggest mistakes that you can make is to forget to include a process write-up for each of your portfolio projects. So in this video, I'll show you exactly what the process write-up is, as well as how to create one for projects of your own. So let's dive right into it. Okay, so let's imagine you've spent dozens or hundreds or even thousands of hours working on some really impressive project and you're ready to upload the final deliverable to your portfolio site. So you do that, you link to it for maybe the home page or maybe your portfolio page, but then when a potential client or hiring manager goes to that project and they experience it for themselves, they may have some questions. They may not be sure what exactly you did for that project. Maybe you did the development, maybe you did the instructional design. Maybe you chose the colors for that project and then an entire team built it without you. So the process write-up helps clear up any confusion around that. It shows the full role that you played in the project, and it just really builds up your credibility with not just hiring managers and potential clients, but also with other instructional designers. So that's what we're talking about here. It is a page on your site that tells the story of your project. So whenever I talk about it, I say, the write-up is 50% of the project. So you might have the final deliverable, some beautiful, well-developed storyline project, but if you don't have the write-up to accompany it, you're not going to get the credibility from that project that you would want. So you need the write-up. It kind of goes hand in hand with the project. It describes your role, the responsibilities you held, and the tools that you used. It also explains the problem you solved and the process that you used to solve it. This piece is, of course, important because it shows that you're not just thinking about, oh yeah, I can use the tools and do all the fancy stuff. I can also use my instructional design skill set to solve real world problems. And the process write-up is where you really emphasize that. All right, so here are the main sections we'll include in the process write-up, just in case you're wondering, what is it actually made up of? We have the overview, the problem, the solution, the process. And in this process section is where you talk about each deliverable or key step that you took to bring the project to life. And you'll have a subheading for each of those. And then the results. So this is basically the outline of your process write-up. And there are plenty of examples for you to look at. I'll link the showcase beneath this video if you haven't been there already. But it includes like over 20 portfolios. And each of those portfolios have process write-ups for every single project. So this video should give you more insight into how those write-ups are created and should help you create yours a bit more intentionally. Okay, so the overview section, this is of course what people will see as soon as they land on this process write-up page. You'll have the title of the project at the top, the cover photo beneath that, a quick 1 to 2 sentence project summary beneath that cover photo, and then some bullet points giving key details about the project. And we'll get into those key details. But the last thing to close out the overview is a button to actually experience the project. Because again, this page, imagine from the homepage of your website, people will see your featured project. Once they click a button to learn more about that project, we're not just going to bring them into like the full final deliverable. We're going to bring them to this process write-up page. And then if you do have a fully functional version of that e-learning project, for example, and you want people to be able to experience it for themselves, you include that button in the overview that links directly to it. So that's kind of the flow. They go from the homepage or from your portfolio page to the write-up, and then from the write-up to the final deliverable if you have that available. Another caveat here, you can include a process write-up and just include screenshots from your deliverables, and maybe you don't even link to a full project. Some people create process write-up pages and just use like mock-ups, and that's a very viable portfolio project as long as you're demonstrating the skills somewhere else in your portfolio that you're highlighting on that project write-up page. All right, so let's dive into each of these in a bit more depth. For the title, this one isn't too difficult. You can include the exact title of your project, or a common approach is to include the topic of your project and the medium of your project. So for example, soft skills for nurses, e-learning. And again, you can see plenty of examples of that on the showcase. I'm sure you can think of something that makes sense with that approach for your project. And that's probably the approach I would recommend. For the cover photo, don't just include a screenshot. People do that a lot when they're creating early drafts of their portfolio. Use mock-ups where you kind of show off a screen from your project on an iPad or on a computer screen. You can use Photoshop for this really easily, especially with templates from FreePick. And I've recorded a YouTube video about exactly how to do that. As long as you have Photoshop or you can get access to Photoshop, you can create these mockups in like less than 10 minutes. So definitely take the time to do that because it makes the whole write-up feel a lot more professional. Write the summary. Again, I would suggest sticking to 1 to 2 sentences here. And if it's a concept project, mention that. Because again, maybe this is for a real client. Maybe this is just a project that you did for your portfolio. If it is for some like fictitious client, make sure you mention that here in the summary. That would be a good place to do so. And then the bullet points to give more info. So these are the 3 I would recommend including at minimum. The audience, who is this actually for? What's the job role? What responsibilities did you hold? So for example, instructional design, e-learning development, graphic design. What kind of roles did you play? And then tools used. So which software did you use? So Articulate Storyline 360, Adobe Illustrator, the Adobe Creative Cloud, whatever tools you use to bring the project to life, this would be a good place to mention them just so that someone who is looking to, does this person have experience with Storyline or Camtasia or whatever it is, they can see exactly which tools you used on the write-up page because that might not always be evident from the final product. So this is all, again, the first things you'll see, and then add the button, the call to action button for people to actually experience the project. Like we mentioned, have this be like a color that's going to pop. You can use just like a hyperlink, but if you can include a button, that's even better. So here are a couple of screenshots. And again, this is from Alex Drobik's site. You can see we have a cover photo, beneath that a project title, a few sentences for the summary, and then we have that audience, responsibilities, and tools used, those bullet points to kind of give an overview of the project at a glance. And then that bold button to experience the project. I brought in this example from Nicole Stevens as well, just because the layout is a little bit different. It doesn't have to be like bullet points, for example. Notice Nicole used these boxes. She used her graphic design skills here to make this look a little bit different. So everyone's write-up page doesn't have to look exactly the same. You can try to bring some creativity to it like Nicole did here. And again, explore the showcase to see even more examples of how people approach this. All right, so that was the first section. That's the overview section. Now we want to explain the problem. Okay, so this is for people who are scrolling down further. They don't want to just jump right into the project. They want to see what the problem was and the thought process that you used to approach and solve this problem. So yeah, what's the problem that the client needed help solving? Why did they contact you? We want to emphasize the pain point here. What were you brought in to help with, essentially? And if it's a concept project and you're mentioning that, it's going to be more of a thought exercise. In this situation, this problem that you've imagined, here's how you would solve it. And if this is new to you, if you don't have a project to actually complete this write-up for, check out the How to Design Effective E-Learning video. That kind of will walk you through how to create a flagship project that checks all the right boxes for the in-demand ID skills right now. And I talk a bit more about how to do this for a concept client. But we'll try to keep this to 2 to 5 sentences. I imagine there may be some cases where this needs to be longer, but as you'll see, a common trend here is we want to keep this very straightforward and approachable. We don't want to lose anyone along the way. So somewhat brief introduction to the problem. And then the next main section of the write-up is the solution. Okay, so as you can imagine, which solutions did you propose? Why did you propose them? Or if it's a singular solution, why did you propose that solution? You're trying to show off that you know what kind of problems you can solve as an instructional designer, and you want to demonstrate that the solution you propose makes sense for the problem at hand. You want to demonstrate that thought. 2 to 5 sentences. And if this isn't, like again, if you just created like an e-learning interaction, for example, maybe you don't include the problem and the solution here, but I would challenge you to see if you can think of a real world use case for that problem. Is there an actual problem that this project would help solve? Even if you didn't think of that problem when you were creating it, see if you can kind of go through a thought exercise and position your project in a way that it is solving a real world problem, because even going through those thought exercises will make you a better instructional designer. And it gives you a better way to frame the project when you're talking about it for interviews or to hiring managers. Okay, so this is the next big section, and this will be the longest section of the process write-up. You're going to actually write about your process. So this is where you outline the steps that you took to bring the project to life. Include a subheading for each deliverable. So I usually start this with like 1 to 3 sentences, kind of giving an overview of the process, and then I dive into a subheading for each deliverable. So the action map, the text-based storyboard, the visual mockups. And for each one of these subheadings, you may have 1 to 3 or maybe even 4 paragraphs for each of them where you kind of explain your decision making around that deliverable and the steps you took to bring that deliverable to life. And again, you can see plenty of examples of that, but also include screenshots of your deliverables throughout. So for each one of these subheadings, like the action map, include a screenshot of your action map. If you did some storyboarding, include screenshots of that. You'll see another common trend here is people will be scanning this write-up page. They're not going to be reading every word. So screenshots will really help kind of bring people along and will help people see, wow, you were very thorough here. You didn't just throw this together in an authoring tool. Like this was, you were very methodical about how you approach this, and you did use a real solid process. The final section of the process write-up, the main section, is the results. So we call this the results section or the results and takeaways section. Of course, it depends on whether or not you implemented this with a real audience, but we want to answer the question, what happened as a result of your project? Did you move any metrics? Of course, that's the gold standard, but a lot of you may be creating just concept projects. And even if you are creating real projects, you may not have access to actual data surrounding the results. So this is like a lesser question you can answer. How was it received? So if you did deliver this to people in the intended audience, how did they receive it? What did they have to say about it? If you showed it off to your peers or other people in the instructional design community, what did they have to say about it? If it was for a supervisor or a client, what did they have to say? So again, trying to bring in some social proof here. And even better if you have testimonials or positive feedback that you can quote directly and attach someone's name and maybe even their photo to. So again, this is that social proof. We want to show you didn't do all of this for nothing. It actually either produced some results or had a real impact in the world. And that impact was recognized by people in the community or other stakeholders. And this is, again, one other thing that you can include here. Do you have any important takeaways from working on this project? So did you learn something? So personal results for your own professional development. Did you learn something that you're going to take away for, and use on future projects? And you want to be careful with this. You don't want to make it sound like you're like naive or like brand new to the field, I would imagine. But if you did, challenge yourself with some advanced development practices here, maybe that's something you want to highlight here in the results and takeaways section. So that is completely up to you. And now let's get into some tips here. Okay, so those are the main sections. You can see those in all the examples, but these tips can help guide you as you write your own process write-up. We want to definitely justify your decisions. This is the place to do that, to show off the thinking behind the decisions you made. We want to keep this really straightforward, and we want to incorporate screenshots and videos. And I'll dive into each of these a bit more in depth, but we'll move through this fairly quickly. So we want to justify your decisions. Okay, discuss how you made key decisions in your project. Why did you do what you did? And especially if you can back these decisions by instructional design science, theory, and principles. One of the biggest things that hiring managers and potential clients want to see is, can you apply instructional design theory and science and principles? So if they're reading through your process write-up and you're literally laying it all out for us exactly how you applied these things, that's going to give you a lot of credibility. So for example, if you used some of Mayer's multimedia principles in certain ways, you can talk about that here. If you followed Gagne's 9 events to kind of plan your learning experience, you can discuss that. Same thing with action mapping. If you use action mapping, cite how you used it. Just send the message that, yeah, you are dialed into the research and to these processes, and you're not just kind of winging it. Like you're actually, applying these like industry standard kind of principles in science and theory. Okay, so next big tip here, and this is a big one, is to keep it straightforward. You've probably scrolled through some of these write-ups and they're very, very long. I can tell you probably 99.9% of people going through them are not reading every word, and that's okay, but we want to make it as easy as possible for people to read every word if they choose to. So use a conversational tone and the active voice. And if you're not already familiar with how to do that, check out the top 5 writing tips for instructional designers video that we did here on the channel. So we can link to that as well. That's a really good one to help with your writing. Avoid jargon. So a common way I see people use jargon is because their project is for a specific audience. And then when they're talking about the process write-up, naturally you want to kind of bring in all of this language that the intended audience would understand, and that maybe the SMEs and stakeholders would understand. But someone reviewing your portfolio in a different industry or a different field, they're not going to have any idea what it's about. So we want to make sure we keep this friendly for people who are reviewing your portfolio, not necessarily people who are in the intended audience for this specific project. Again, busy people without subject matter expertise will skim the write-up. They will not read every word. So we want to plan accordingly, essentially. We want to give people just enough to follow your process and see that you know your stuff. We don't want to get them lost with, academic language or jargon or, 10 paragraphs to talk about your action map or the problem or anything like that. So we're trying to keep it straightforward, but still comprehensive. And then, of course, if you're writing for the web, we don't want to have these like 5-6 sentence long paragraphs. Try to use short 1 to 3 sentence paragraphs. And in most cases, it's like 1 or 2 sentences. Again, that helps with the scanning, and it helps people not get lost with their eyes going back and forth across the screen. The final tip I have for you, and I mentioned it a few times, but it is important, show off your nicest layouts, interactions, and animations with screenshots and short videos. Okay, because again, people will be scanning. If they do scan and if they don't experience your project, we still want them to kind of see your work. We want them to see some of your screenshots, see some videos. We want them we want the pictures and the visuals and the videos that people see to make them feel like they need to experience that full project for themselves. It's kind of like little previews. And then if they don't have time to experience the project for themselves, they're not going to have to read every word to figure out what you did. There will be some visuals to support that. So once again, if you have some projects and you want to see examples of how people tackle this, check out the showcase, which I'll link below. And if you still need to create your portfolio projects and you're wondering what to create, I'll link some videos below to help with that as well. So thanks for making it to the end. And if you have a write-up that you'd like to share with us, why don't you go ahead and drop a comment just so we can add to the inspiration that we all have to look towards. So thank you again, and I will see you in the next video.